Hello. Welcome. My name is Lynn Allen. I'm the director of the School of Visual Arts here at BU, and 10 minutes ago we didn't have a screen. So it's a good thing that we have, we're not looking at it on a 6-foot little thing like we're watching home movies at home. It's my pleasure to welcome my friend Willie Cole, who is, surprisingly enough, went to BU for a year in the 70s. And he told me over lunch that he tried to get a job at the radio station. That was his big thing. He wanted to get a job at the radio station, and they wouldn't hire him. So he hung out with the theater people, and he wrote a musical and a screenplay and had it performed. And then he went to the School for Visual Arts in New York, is where he graduated and got his BFA. But he started here, so this is a good thing. Willie is tough to define because he's not just a sculptor. He's not just an installation artist or a printmaker or a musician. He is the kind of artist that is interested and curious in just about everything. As you will see from the lecture he gives today, he's really very, very versatile. And his ideas and interests just keep expanding. I mean, he even dabbled on the piano a little bit here while we were waiting. So he's really hard to define. His career is phenomenal. I mean, he has had major solo exhibitions in just about every major museum here in the States as well as overseas. He's in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and all the major museums, the Miami Museum. He has a traveling exhibition now that started at the Montclair Art Museum in New Jersey. It's going to 7 cities, called The Anxious Object. He is a collector of found objects, which you will see in his presentation, and an all-around very interesting and great artist. And so please join me in welcoming Willie.
Well, I hope that all she said is true, and I'll do my best to share that truth with you. My organization of the presentation is not so smooth, but I originally wanted to start with a video, thinking we'd have sound. I'm going to start with the video anyway, and I'll talk about that piece first. Because I hear that in town here there is a big show about Yoruba. Stay here. Big show about Yoruba art. Yoruba being a people in the Nigeria area of West Africa. And I did a lot of work with those religious principles, specifically with a god named Elegba. This piece is called the Elegba Principle, because Elegba is the god who presents choices to you. His symbols are doors. So this installation is a room of revolving doors. This was shot before the opening, but the final stage has text on each door, so you walk through the door and you choose your direction in life. There are 140 doors here. And this is, I took this off the internet. This just shows myself and the gallery manager and a homeless man I met on the street going through. So I planned to let this play because it has music, and I was going to keep trying to walk away from the podium. The mic is right here. And talk about it, but I have to stay here. So yeah, I went to BU for about a year. In the 70s, it was a very different kind of school. There were a lot of race riots on campus, so it wasn't a pleasant place for me to be. So I returned to New York to the School of Visual Arts because it was just more creative, more free. But I know now with Lynn here, this school will become a great, great institution for learning the arts. So my work moves along a couple of lines. I focus on spirituality, and I try to combine that with the everyday existence. I think that everything is one thing, so my art is really the expression of the oneness, how one thing is everything and everything is one thing. So in my assemblage, I work obsessively with a single object in multiples and turn it into other things. And you'll see from my PowerPoint presentation that my other work revolves around politics and religion of the time. Now this would be much greater with the music. So I'm going to go now to the PowerPoint part of the show. And it starts with my, I guess you call it my basic chronology. In this art world that we live in today, my first success came through the use of a steam iron. So my presentation begins with that. Freeze it. And this helps me to kill a few minutes here. So I can anticipate some of the questions I would get. So I didn't have a special love or attraction for the steam iron. It's just that I did have a day of walking down the street and discovering a steam iron. And it was just so beautiful to me that I decided that I would use it as a art production tool. And this is not the first steam iron that I found on the street, but it's one I have a picture of. And just, it had so many different elements to it. It has the bottom, which is silver, which is shaped like a shoe, shaped like a boat, shaped like a house, depending on how you have it standing. It has steam holes on the bottom, which I turned into scarification for the face. The handle is black, so I made a list of words related to the steam iron and tried to listen to religion and culture. So black handle meant black people, steam iron meant servitude, servitude meant slavery, the shape, boat meant slave ships, and just went on and on from there. It became a big list of words that allowed me to make art from the iron, using the iron, referencing the iron for years to come. So from a business point of view, I did that deliberately for many years. And then I moved to other things. So these first few slides show the iron. I mentioned to some students earlier that the art world likes to make reference to the past. If they're writing about your work and they can see that it grew out of something else, they like that. That gives the critics a chance to show off their education. So I made this piece after Man Ray, but instead of nails, I used feathers to suggest the steam. This piece, excuse the bad slide, but this shows the iron and the ironing board in the same pattern of a very popular image of a slave ship. So the ironing board is a slave ship, and the irons around it represents the way the slaves are laid on the ship or the various tribes that are on the ship. So in my twisted or creative imagination, each iron brand became a tribe. So there's a tribe of the Silex, the Black & Decker, the GE, the Sunbeam. So that's their symbols around it. And this is all actual size woodblock print with the objects embedded into the block. This is a woman from the GE tribe. Her scarification comes from the steam iron. And the scarification is actually on a piece of plate glass, sandblasted, laid on top of the photograph. This is the male member of the tribe. This is a Silex male on the left wearing his Silex scarification and headdress, and a sunbeam on the right here. These pieces were made at Rutgers Center for Innovative Print and Paper, which is now called the Brodsky Center. You can all apply there and get a nice opportunity. This is almost life-size. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. This shows another tribal member. This is actually my face, but left and right, 2 lefts together and 2 rights together, so it gives me 2 different faces. It's called Initiates, and it shows, again, the different tribes, the Silex, the Sunbeam, the GE, etc. This piece you all know, I've been seen hanging around here. This is called Man, Spirit, Mask, and it's called Man, Spirit, Mask because the first image is the man, which is me, the tribal member. The middle image is the spirit, which is the evidence of the power. Spirit is evidence of power. So the evidence of the power of the iron comes from the scorch, from the heat, so that's the spirit. And the mask is what conceals the spirit, which is going to be the handle of the iron or the body of the iron. So it's called Man, Spirit, Mask for that reason. Also made it to Brodsky Center in New Jersey, where Lynn was the former director. These pieces they grew out of the small Polaroid images of steam irons that look like masks to me. So I have them blown up and printed digitally to emphasize their mask and face-like quality. Some of them are the image cut in half and two halves put together, two lefts put together so it would be symmetrical. You can see the one here on your right. It's called Loyal and Dependable because I thought it looked like a dog. And everything there was there. I didn't really do any like Photoshop to it. It's pretty much straight from the camera other than me cutting the image in half and flipping it. And these next three slides just show more in that same body. The one over there on your left is called Quick as a Wink, and it really is a one-eyed steam iron from the 1950s. The water goes in that opening there. But before I started doing all those things, I made sculpture out of irons, and these are actually the first pieces I made from steam irons. At that time, I was very interested in taking one iron, taking it apart, and using all the parts to reassemble it into something else. So these two pieces are probably the only evidence I have of that. So that's where the whole idea of oneness began for me. First, it was almost like wanting ethnic purity. I wouldn't mix a GE and a Sunbeam together. It had to be all GE, all one GE. But as the years went on, I began to mix them because I had so many irons. And as I said, a lot were inspired by African art. So I have this juxtaposition here just to show some of the inspiration. The African piece is actually Ibeji from the Yoruba, Nigeria. And the juxtaposition was made by a curator at some other museum, not by me. I would have chosen a Dogon for this, but I could understand her association. My piece there on your left is actually a stack made from handles. It was called Heel and Rest, because that was the name of the steam iron that it was made from. So I had several Heel and Rest steam irons, and I just put the handles together to make a big totem stack. You have to imagine the scale based on what you know about a steam iron. You can see the same here. I spoke to someone today about assemblage, and I pointed out to her that most assemblage artists, if you saw a show of assemblage artists, they would all look like they were by the same artist. You have to figure out a way to make it your own signature. So I did that by choosing certain materials. So now whenever anyone sees a work made from steam iron, they always think it's me, even if it's not. So that was my personal coup in the art world. Now those pieces I showed, the past 4 slides were from the early 90s, I believe. But these are from 2003, and they're just made from the handles alone. There's a big occurrence of men on horseback in a lot of tribal art. So this is my effort at the man on horseback. I wish I had a pointer, but you can see, I guess clearly, that this is the horse's head here, and the rider's up there. This is very patterned after the real thing. This is very much like a Yoruba man on horseback. If you go to a museum of African art, you'll see that. And this was very much like a Dogon man on horseback. The Dogon man on horseback is made out of terracotta. The Yoruba is made out of wood, normally. This piece was the piece or the work that first got me real attention in the New York art world because these were African-like shields, like Zulu shields made from ironing boards. And each board has a different brand of iron on it. So there's the Silex, the Sunbeam, and on down the line. So when I had my first big one-person show in New York City in a commercial gallery, this is the piece that got me a review in the Village Voice, New York Times, Art in America, et cetera, et cetera. So this was like 1990, I believe. This again, scorch on canvas. My paintings now are scorches on canvas, even though I haven't done them in a while, but my gallery calls them paintings on canvas and they call them drawings when they're on paper. I also do them on wood, and I do them 2 ways. Like I do them on wood using a forge, so I get a real hot fire, and it's like a branding iron. But I do them on canvas using a hot plate. I take the iron apart, so I just have the bottom part, and I heat that up. So that was probably quite a few years of making art out of steam irons, to the point where I decided just to make irons out of anything. So these irons here, the white ones made from a boat. It's about maybe 10 feet tall, a rowboat, and I, of course, just made the handle out of wood and coat the whole thing with Bondo and sanded it down. The black one is just made from scraps of wood. It's not made from a boat. And the handle came as a result of a raid on an abandoned building in the city of Newark. I took out the banister and was able to use it for a handle there. I usually named them after the tribal aesthetic that they seem to project to me. So this one is called the Luba 500 because it's 500% the size of an actual iron, and it looks like a work of art by the Luba. The other one is just called Guardian, and only because it's big and imposing like a guardian spirit. These smaller irons are actually made from ironing boards. So the height of these irons are the size of an ironing board. After collecting so many irons and ironing boards, they just became material. The ironing board just became sheet metal to me. So I was able to cut it up and put it together. And the blue and white one is called Mother and Child, because if you look at the top of the handle, that little iron there, that's now the button on the big iron, was the model for the big iron. So it's Mother and Child. I don't remember much about the white one there, I have to say. Again, I tried to use the aesthetic of the tribe in my piece. So this is a Kanaga steam iron, because I was able to get aesthetics from the Kanaga mask worn by the Dogon people of Mali. And my iron is about 7 feet tall. It's at the St. Louis Museum of Art now. This one is called the Chiwa, after the Chiwa of Central Africa. And their sculpture is always woven like that. This is actually some sort of headdress here. So my iron is woven, made from all natural materials. This is about 6 feet as well. I spoke with someone today who maybe, Jonathan maybe, spoke about the structure and how much he likes structure. But in this piece, I like the internal structure more than the outside part. So I can appreciate that. So I think those are all the iron things I have here. Around 2001, after 9/11, it was hard for me to make a work that was personal mythology, and I wanted to make something more political. That happened also in the first Gulf War with George Bush I. I couldn't continue to make steam irons when there was a war, so I started making something else. So the same thing happened here. So what I did, I made what I call Malcolm's Chickens. Malcolm's Chickens are named after Malcolm X's speech. I assume most of you nowadays know who Malcolm X is. He wasn't popular in his time, but now the whole world knows Malcolm X. It's kind of ironic. But when the media asked Malcolm X about the assassination of John Kennedy, Malcolm's response was it was a case of chickens coming home to roost. So when 9/11 occurred, I don't know if this is a Republican or a Democratic town or how you all feel, so I don't mean to offend anybody, but when 9/11 occurred, I thought of it as a case of chickens coming home to roost, because the U.S. government exports terrorism around the world. They call it war, they call it liberation, but it's very similar. A lot of people say the real terrorist is not in the Middle East, but we're being terrorized through the things they implant in us to make us fearful. So the chicken coming home to roost flies to New York City, sits on the World Trade Center, and drops a bomb. So my chicken is a firebomb. This is a styrofoam chicken covered with matches, and a lot of flammable stuff inside. Is about this big. If I had him here and set him on fire, it would clear the room. It's also a test of Homeland Security, because I was able to send this piece to Holland for a show, and it never, they didn't stop it. I mean, it's a firebomb. So after I did that one in 2001, my gallery liked them a lot, so I've made a couple others. The little one here, the rooster one on the right, has firecrackers for toenails. So he's a big banger. And the middle one over there is just I guess they call them biddies, right? But they're all about this big. After I did those chickens, still inspired by the troubles of the world, I made this piece here called The Suicide Virgin, because there was an article in the, I think it was Newsweek magazine, about female suicide bombers. So she has a cloak made out of firecrackers. And I figured if in her day she could have stepped up to help her son, she could have strapped, they didn't have explosive, I know, but she could have strapped something on her body and stepped out there and said, "You let him go, or I'm going to blow this place up." So that's what she's doing here in my art. But at the same time, her son could have been more aggressive as well. I know he was on a mission. But here, I've taken all the food off the table, and they all have AK-47s. So it's kind of the same story. You see, he's making his gun levitate. But there's all the stuff around 2001. In 2005, I believe, I made this piece because I have an 11-year-old daughter. She's 12 now. I had a birthday last week. And I watched a lot of cartoons with her. One of my favorite cartoons, and the ones that she watched, was Cow and Chicken. So I made the red guy. And I made this piece. Partly I was traveling through the South, Bible Belt, and somebody gave me a little postcard with Jesus Christ standing at the door knocking, just like that. And it made me realize that in my lifetime, I've seen the image of the devil mutate to all kinds of forms. You see him as a kid, you see him as a cartoon, you see him looking various ways, but Christ always looks the same. So I thought I would just put the two of them together, but like the latest version of the devil, which is the cartoon from Cow and Chicken, along with this standard old JC image. So he's pretty big. The Christ that was a mannequin is life-size, about 6 feet tall. So this is as big as a big dog, might be about that high, and maybe a little wider than that. So again, back to things of African influence. There are the Bambara people wear a headdress during their agricultural rites that is called the Chawari, and is based on the antelope form. So I, at some point in my life, figured that the bicycle looks a lot like a Chawari. So in this year, I think it may have been 2003 or 4, I began to make Chawaris out of bicycles. And I'm still doing this now. I have a show coming up in Miami in December that's going to be all Chawaris. But you can see when you see a small one on the back of a large one, it's a female. And when you see a single one with a penis, obvious down there below, that's the male. So now you'll recognize them when you see them. So that's one of my female Chawaris there. And there's one of each there. I put them on a little gear because it's a headdress, so you can't have a big wide base. It's got to be to fit on your head. So I often think of these things as being for the real world, even though they're not. This piece is made after Ganesh, the Hindu god of prosperity, the elephant-headed son of Shiva. And I made this piece after being in resident at the Kohler Arts Center in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, another place for anybody to apply for residency. They give you a nice apartment to stay in, and you have 24-hour access to everything in the factory. They make toilets and sinks, so they have a lot of clay stuff there. But they also make bathtubs out of fiberglass. They have a fiberglass shop as well. But because I wasn't interested in making things out of soft clay, I went to the area where they throw away the toilets that don't come out perfect. And I cut off shapes off of those and reassembled them to make these pieces here, and added the faucets for the heads. So this piece is, well, he's sitting on the top of a toilet tank. So that gives you an idea of his size. I also made these big shoes at Kohler because I wanted to make a high-heel urinal when I was there. But they could not figure out how to get a mold that big into their kiln. So I just now use them in my yard for flowers. Earlier, this goes back to probably 1991 or 2. This is during the time of Fernando Marcos, his wife Imelda Marcos. He was the president of some South American country who was a puppet for the Bush administration, not the Bush, but for the Nixon administration, but at some of the Philippines. But at some point, he became their enemy, so they had to get rid of him. And when they did, when they went to the palace, they said his wife Imelda had thousands of shoes. So this piece is called Made in the Philippines, in honor of Imelda Marcos. And it's about 3,000 high-heel shoes in there. Now, again, this was like in 1991 or 92, but I've since returned to the shoes because I've just visually learned so much about forms since then that I've been able to make other pieces. But at the time I made the shoe chair, I was making these masks from shoes also. This mask here is called Joanne, after Joanne Chesimard. Joanne Chesimard was a political activist and a college professor who was arrested in New Jersey for killing state troopers. She's in jail. Well, she's not in jail now. She's in exile in Cuba. She's on the FBI's most wanted list. Like, she's in the top 3. But I named it after her because it looks ferocious. It looks like a panther, so the Black Panther Party. I do a lot of word games, analogies, like I said. But because it was female shoes, I couldn't call it Huey Newton or Malcolm X. I had named it after a woman, so I named it after her. The other one here is just a hairdryer mask. I can say that I was walking down the street and I found a factory filled with hairdryers. So I collected them all. I didn't have a car, but I had a shopping cart. Filled it up, made several trips, ended up with thousands of hairdryers. And for about 2 years, I made work out of hairdryers. So I made several of these masks here, and they're pretty much named after what they are. Like, this one has the number 1100 on it, so it's probably called Air Mask 1100. And you know the size of a hairdryer, so it's about this wide and maybe about that big. But as I mentioned about the words, before my art was my livelihood, I did a lot of writing, trying to sell stories and screenplays and things like that. So once my art became the way I made a living, I had to figure out a way to make my writing part of my art. So I started making these acronym blackboards. So this one was made around the word America. And I guess you can read it. The first line says, Adam makes Eve regret ingesting contaminated apples. And Allied massacre ends revolutionary insurgents coup attempt. So a lot of them were made either with the New York Times, highlighting the letters in each story that begin with these words, highlighting the words in each story that begin with these letters, or they were made listening or watching the news, CNN on television, and pulling the words out of each story. Now these are just postcard images. I did a piece called International Balls. It was inspired by something Bill Clinton said that made me say, man, that president's got a lot of balls. So then I got 200 bowling balls and gave each one the look of the flag of various countries. Now, this is one of my videos that won't play in my PowerPoint, but this piece, Everything and Anything, is a field of turnstiles. It's similar to the first piece I showed you with the revolving doors, but I want to have that same experience outdoors, so I made these turnstiles out of PVC pipes. And I wish it would play, but it's not going to play. But you can see people walking through it. Each arm of the turnstile has a word on it. The piece is called Everything and Anything because I worked with 10 high school students. I asked them to write phrases with the words everything and anything. So anything you ever wanted, everything you ever dreamed of, things like that. So as you push through each one, a little bell rings, and it's like every time a bell rings, the angel gets his wings. So it's kind of based on that movie line. This piece, To Get to the Other Side, answers that question, which is, if you are little kids, you all would say right now, why did chicken cross the road? But it answers that question, to get to the other side. And it refers to any ritual in any Yoruba-based religion. The first god that you addressed is Elegba. So Elegba helps you get to the other side. In my work, Elegba has become the lawn jockey because the colors of Elegba are similar to the lawn jockey, the same colors, red and black. And Elegba stands at the door of your house. If you have a little symbol for Elegba, it's going to be at the front of your house. The lawn jockey stands in the front of your house also. And this is a book by an author named Myra Dern called The Divine Horseman. And she refers to the fact that the title means the people are the horses and the gods are the horsemen. Okay, so the people are the horses, the gods are the horsemen. The lawn jockey doesn't ride the horse, he's a jockey boy. He brings the horse to the rider. So the lawn jockey does the same thing as Elegba, so I made him the Elegba in my art. Also, Elegba is a warrior spirit, so that made it perfect for a chess game here. And the players are, the plain ones like that, of course, are just going to be the pawns. Decorated ones, the knight, filled with nails like the Ninkisi from the Congo, or like, is it Saint Michael maybe, with all the nails, the sacrificed. And then the rook is covered with bundles. I've shown this piece about 6 times. It's no longer in my possession, but when I see it in the museum, when they install it, I add more onto it. So this rook now has a big body covered with balls of plastic stuff with things and white cloth stuff with things. Because in New Jersey, the homeless people walking around carry everything they own with them. So he's carrying all his magic in those bundles, covering his whole body. The bishop is a holy man carrying vessels filled with spirits. A lot of cultures in the Western Hemisphere and abroad use the vessel as a container of spirits. Even in our language, a whiskey bottle is a vessel, and whiskey is a spirit. So he's carrying a bunch of bottles because the bishop is a holy man. And my kings and queens are dressed in their royalty. They're wearing power cloth. Their garments made out of neckties. And they're wearing rings, copper rings and bracelets after the Benin people of West Africa. So here you can see international balls all spread out at the Miami Art Museum. It's like a big marble game. This show also included the Elegba principle. The first piece I showed you, Remember Revolving Doors. So that's what a lawn jockey is there. Behind him is the other piece there. In Miami, they didn't mind the Elegba principle being loose on the floor like that, but at the Bronx Museum, they were concerned about the balls being kicked, so I had to put them in little brackets like pool. So this is that same piece installed in a different museum. And I pretty much spoke about the lawn jockey a lot, but the lawn jockey for me is, I don't know, I've done installations with a lawn jockey that represent Van Gogh's painting, The Sower, because the sower in Van Gogh's painting is in the same position as the lawn jockey. So that led to this photograph here that says, a sower went forth to sow, and when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside. And for me, that just reflected the Van Gogh, as well as the Elegba, as well as the Bible. Now, my last show in New York was in January of this year. So this is a blossom made from high-heel shoes. This is about 8 feet in diameter. And it's quite a bit of shoes. I don't remember the exact number. But it's called with a heart of gold because the center blossom part is gold high-heel shoes. And it's made in 3 layers so that it can be easily transported. So 3 rings put together, concentric sizes, to make one big blossom. In that same show, I had these pieces that were kind of the Tibetan gods made from shoes as well. So it's like I said, I made those chairs and high-heel mask back in '91, but I've learned so much more since then. I was able to bring it back and take it a little further. And that's what this is. So this is Makala, who is the protector of Tibetan Buddhism, is the inspiration for this image. And this piece here, they just represent tantric love. I forget the titles, but I don't know if it's clear to you. And I'm going to step over here again to show you. The blue one is the male, the yellow one is the female. So this is the female's behind here. Her legs going up around the belly. There's a breast right there. And they're looking at each other. This was pretty much the same, just in white, but her knee is bent, wrapping around his body. And her head is turned a little to the side. So this piece, and the bicycle pieces are what I'm actually doing right now. If I wasn't here, I'd be home working on pieces like this. And I'd have just one more soundless video to share with you. I wanted you to hear the sound because I do music as well, and I've included the music in the videos. But I'll show you a little bit of it. This is the one called Everything and Anything. This is at a place in New York called Wave Hill. It's a place that they teach gardening skills, but they install sculpture in their gardens. It's also a good example of what artists can do with a small budget. Because they gave me like $1,500 to make this piece. And the only material I could use would be PVC pipes. I can buy an 8-foot-long PVC pipe and make one turnstile out of it just by cutting it into sections. So this is all PVC pipes and fence post caps on the end and press type. You know, I've made, whenever I can, I try to make my art into like a short 1 or 2 minute video, because that's easy to post on the net. And this music was originally a very up-tempo country song, but through the synthesizer, I was able to program it and slow it down to make it more like an insurance commercial soundtrack. Yeah, kids really love this piece. I've been trying to sell this piece as a public installation, and it doesn't hurt them. I proposed this to the city of New York as a memorial for Malcolm X. I was going to make it out of real turnstiles and put Malcolm's history on each arm of it, but they didn't go for it. So I still seek a home for this idea. And I have the prototype still in my garage at home. And I think of this as the prototype. And I have one more, but we can start taking questions with this one, because it's just a nice background image. It's called Snake Eyes. And it's just this nonstop. I showed this on 2 huge projections in the gallery. And the sound was what I like most, which we don't fully experience it here. So that's it. I'll take some questions now. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering, in those, I guess the final slides that you showed, transfer sex kind of thing, the one on the right was obviously a figure made of black shoes and a figure made of white shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if there were any like racial undertones that you were actually putting in there on purpose, or if that was just how it turned out.
Right. Well, the other one was made of blue and yellow.
Right.
There's no blue race that I know of.
I was just wondering,
But-
because looking at it, that's the first thing I thought of.
Right.
Wondering if that was intentional.
No, it's just that in my studio now, I have probably 20,000 pairs of shoes separated into colors. And when I start to make things out of them, certain ones look good together and other ones don't. You know, the style of the shoe, like I may need a bigger shoe for a certain part that I may only have in white, so that forced me to make that whole thing out of white. But there was no deliberate racial overtone. Maybe subliminal, but or unconscious, but not deliberate. Yes? I'm here at BU with no questions. Yes.
You were still talking about the one you made out of black shoes that was like a scary face, and you did that to activists
Right.
Cuba.
Right.
I guess you kind of alluded to that you named it after her after you made the piece. I was wondering when in the process do you know that, like when you're making a piece, do you kind of base it off the aesthetics of what you're doing and slowly find what it's going to be about during the process, or sometimes you do it afterwards, or do you have a vision before, or how do you?
Well, I start out like play. Said I got all these shoes and all these irons, and it's like Christmas, and I got a new puzzle or a new set of building blocks. I kind of just play with it and see what happens. Like when I made those heads, the first thing I made was the teeth. It took me a month to realize that I could put those heels together and make teeth. So then I grew out of that. And after I saw it, it looked so aggressive, I knew it had to be something revolutionary. So the next thing bigger. And I often don't know what it's going to be when I start. I don't make any sketches or anything like that. Yes?
I'm just curious how you get all the shoes.
Well, currently, I get my shoes from the Salvation Army thrift store in Paterson, New Jersey. They save them for me, and I go there and buy them by the pound. I get them for 50 cents a pound, and I go about every 6 weeks. But my blow dryers, I found them in an abandoned factory. I was making jewelry out of small metal washers. So I'm following the trail of the wash. Should I be repeating the questions? I'm not doing that.
We're supposed to, but it's okay.
I'm following the trail of rusty washers down the street. It leads me right up into this factory. When I get there on the second floor, there's a mountain of blue and white hair dryers. So I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but there was so many of them that I knew I could do something with them. So that's how that came about. And the irons were just more of a spiritual connection for me, in that I would find an iron on the street every time I needed one. And that worked for a couple years, but when my work began to sell, I couldn't get irons fast enough. I started going to a thrift store buying them. But often when I'm in a place like this, somebody will always say to me, I got some shoes, I'm going to mail them to you. I got an iron, I'm going to mail it to you. With the bicycles, it's kind of crazy. Like, I drive around, I see a bike on the street, I throw it in my truck. I do that a lot. So I actually go hunting for them because I don't want to buy new bikes. Initially, there was a guy in my neighborhood, kind of like a bicycle repair guy, and he would give me old bikes for $5, but he went out of business. So now I just go hunting for them, and I always find them. It's just can feel it, like, oh, I better turn here, I bet there's 3 bikes up the street. I get there, and they're laying there waiting for me. Yes, sir.
Do you find that filming your pieces and some of the installations is sufficient enough to show as the piece itself, or do you cherish the actual experience and interaction of someone being able to walk into a room?
Do I find that the videos of my piece are sufficient enough to give the experience as opposed to actually walking through the actual pieces? Of course, walking through the piece is the best way to go. But when you don't own the work, sometimes all you have is the video. So even for my own enjoyment at home, I don't have it anymore, so I can look at the video of it. The dice was video as art. The other pieces, too, were video as documentation. And I want to practice my editing, so I started doing it for that reason as well. I wanted to find a way to combine my music with my presentation, so I did it for that reason as well. Yes?
Do you play music at the actual presentations, like the on-site installation?
Not in a long time. I used to play with this really crazy noise, kind of crazy, insane group of musicians, and we didn't play real instruments, we played toys. Like, one guy had a suitcase of rubber ducks, so you're just squeezing the ducks all night long. That's like our horn section. We play a banjo with a screw, so things like that. We did that for years, and we were all painted up like the Art Ensemble of Chicago. I don't know if you know that group, or like the Funkadelics, a group from the 60s and 70s. So that was a lot of fun. So back in those days, we would always play at our openings. In the past 20 years, though, I haven't really mixed the two together, because I take the music a little more serious now, and I try to, it's just a whole different different thing. I think of it like I did some music as soundtracks. I did some music for a dance company. And then on the internet, I have some music just myself with my daughter singing background vocals, me playing the guitar and singing under the name of Black Gomez. So actually, I have some in this computer also, but I'm not going to play it now.
Is that something you would be considering for the future, compose something specifically around the piece or vice versa?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I'm interested in combining the two things, combining as many forms of art production as I can. So eventually that will happen. I see it all coming together mostly through filmmaking. So I'm working on that now. Yes, 1 second. Yes.
So when you're using particular materials in assemblage to sort of say something spiritual, do you feel that it has to do with the power of the deity coming through, or the supposed spiritual idea coming through in the materials and giving new life to old materials? Or is it just using whatever's there to sort of explain this idea that it's being filtered from this other culture that's being filtered through your perception of the objects around you, something like that?
I can't repeat that whole question, but it was something, something about the spiritual aspect of these forms that I put together, and where does it come from, or how's it come about? That's kind of summarize it, right?
Like, how do you arrive at a particular deity? You decide that you made
Right.
this, like a light bulb out of these things.
I understand.
Okay.
Yes. So, no, I don't have an idea before I start. Like with the lawn jockey, I was on my way to San Francisco on a flight. I was reading a book by John Mason called Black Gods in the New World. And in that book, he lists all the Yoruba, all the African gods, all their attributes, all their colors, and all that stuff. So when I got to the page of Elegba, I noticed all these things that reminded me of lawn jockeys, you know, the colors, the horse metaphors, and all that stuff. I mean, Mercury is the messenger of the gods in Rome, so he's like Mercury, he's the messenger of the gods. And so by the time my flight landed, I knew I was going to do something about Elegba in the gallery, but I didn't know what it was going to be. So I said, well, San Francisco, the golden gated city. So, oh, gates, that's like doors. This whole Elegba thing would be perfect for that. So then I got into the Yellow Pages, and I tried to find a place to buy the lawn jockey and salvage yards to buy the doors, and so it came together that way. With the shoe pieces, the last ones that I showed you, I saw a show at Cornell University of Tibetan art. And also, I grew up in the city of Newark, and the Newark Museum has the nation's largest collection of Tibetan art. So I have these images in my head. When I made the first shoe mask, I was thinking Sylvester, the cat, like Sylvester and Tweety Pot. It was more cartoon-like, you know. But as I began to learn more about other world cultures and art, I noticed those faces are similar to the ones in, you know, this Tibetan stuff. So when I started making him, I already knew that his visual image would be linked to Tibet. But I didn't know exactly how it would come out, you know. And I always believe that the shoe, anything that's touched by a human, has a certain kind of power to it, you know. It's like we leave residue wherever we go. You know, we can't see the dust behind us, but we're dropping residue every place we go. In fact, everybody's dust is blending together at all times. Don't want to get too crazy here. But you can pick up on somebody else's energy who died 100 years ago because their residue is still there. I mean, this is one of Einstein's theories, the unified theory. It talks about how we are all existing in one bowl of cosmic dust. You know, and it's only certain sound vibrations that hold some together solid and make us see each other as solid. But we're all moving through the same dust. So the shoe has a lot of memory. It has a lot of that kind of memory, but it also has the physical memory that's evident. You take off your shoe, it still has the shape of your foot, so the shoe has memory. You know, it has the smell of your foot, so the shoe has memory. Of course, I'm not working with smells here, but I'm just pointing out how memory exists in things, you know, through all times. So somehow, and it's harder to explain, but I just feel that by putting the things together in a certain way, looking at them abstractly, not looking at the shoe as a shoe, you know, like I separate them. So I got a whole pile of red ones. I know these are all lips here. They're no longer red shoes, they're all lips. Got a pile of white ones, I know these are all teeth. You know, I choose the colors red, black, and white because those are powerful spiritual colors in most traditions. So just that awareness makes it happen, you know, I would say. Right. Yes, ma'am.
What material do you use to hold together all the shoes and blow dryers and stuff?
Well, with the blow dryers, they all come in, you know, two shells together with a fan in the middle. So I use those same screws. I just take the screws already in there, put them in new places. You know. With the shoes, I use a combination of things. I use a rivet gun. Sometimes I sew them together. And for the big flower, I use the big carpet stapler. So the staples are this long. So I just staple it down into a wooden plate that way. With the chair, I take the heel off the shoe. So now I have all these shoes without heels. So now I can treat them like beads. I didn't repeat the question again. I treat them like beads. And so my armature is like a box made out of posts, like a, what's it called, a baby playpen kind of type shape. Rails going up all around, the front section being lower, because that's where the seat is. I just slide the shoes down on that. And then for the ones going across, I use a heavy-duty like aircraft cable, tie it from the front to the back, and just thread them onto that. So you sit in the chair, it gives in a little bit. It's comfortable like a nice leather chair, you know. So I try to not use hardware as hardware, but if it's going to be visible, I try to make it part of the piece. I also prefer not to use an armature, so I try to find the support and the strength in the object, so I don't have to build an armature and attach it. Because I feel if I attach it, I'm not really doing assemblage. I'm doing more like decoupage or something like that. But I want the stuff to be self-supporting. Yes?
After graduating from school, what did you do? What did you involve yourself in to get yourself to the level that you're at?
Well, let me see how much time we have, because that's a... She said after graduating from school, what were the steps to get here on the stage in BU today? When I got out of school, my first job was as a janitor in a bowling alley, because I could do that at night and be free all day. At that time, I wanted to be an illustrator, so I'd walk around New York all day with a portfolio at agencies, ad agencies, magazines, record companies, trying to get work in the daytime, and at night I'd do the bowling alley. After that, I moved to California for a year and tried to write sitcoms, because my sister worked at NBC, so I thought she could get me some appointments, you know. So I did that for about 6 months with no success. Then I came back to New Jersey, and I got a job in the theater department at the University of Delaware. And they had a children's theater company. We did fairy tales all around the state. We did a soap opera in the mall every Saturday. So I did that for a year. And after that, I came back to Jersey, and I worked as a substitute school teacher whenever I had to. I tried to avoid it as much as possible. But I pretty much just did my work. My artwork has always been my full-time job. Everything else had to be part-time. So I got to the point where I didn't give myself options. It's like if I have no money, I'm not going to say, man, I got to get a job. Instead, I would say, what can I do with my art to make some money? And sometimes I stretched it out to be anything that involved paint, like painting a sign, painting a room in a house. But mostly I try to keep it at, you know, what we know as visual or contemporary art. And I did that, did a lot of freelance graphic design work. I got to a point where I had a little company of graphic design called the Works Gallery, and I would rent out the gallery space for parties. And this was like 4 years after school. I got out of school in '76, but I didn't find a dealer in New York to represent me until 1990. So between '76 and '90, I did all kinds of crazy things. But in 1979, I got a job as a computer graphics artist, and I worked that job for 2 years. That was my first real job. I had to go there every day in the morning and work 8 hours and all that kind of stuff. And although I liked the equipment, this was pre-Macintosh too, so our workstation looked like the Starship Enterprise. You know? Our CPU was in a room all by itself. They called it a standalone. You know? But I did that for 2 years, and I got fired from that job for racist reasons that you don't even want to hear. But in the 70s and 80s, that probably today it's still happening in lots of parts of the world, especially in this country. So I tried to get a job at Children's Television Workshop designing video games, When I didn't get that job, I said, hey, I'm just going to be an artist. So that was 1982. So from 82 to 90, I did portraits on the streets in New York, and I made little color Xeroxes of my paintings and framed and sold them on the streets of New York. And I just did that. I reduced my expenses. I lived in a 2,500 square foot loft with my son, and it was all workspace. We just had 2 beds in the corner. It was all workspace. And it only cost, my rent was $300 a month, so I didn't have to make much money. So I can do like a few portraits on the weekend and you know, have enough money to pay other bills. And that's all I did until 1989. I got a residency at a museum in New York. They gave me a regular salary and a show in the museum at the end of my year there. So my career took off from that point, from 1989. So this is the quick version of it, but you can probably go online to find all this information out. I have 2 catalogs published recently in the past 2 years with big chronology in them. One is called Afterburn, and one is called Anxious Objects. And they have a long chronology starting from my birth in 1955 up to the present. So it can answer all those questions. Yes, sir.
I don't really know how to pose this question, but something occurred to me that through the majority of your artwork, especially the pieces that were very successful, I guess I would say is they were all made from items that were well dusted, that were, you know, belonged to someone, were secondhand, were significant to someone at some point in the life of the object.
Right.
Is that something that you consciously notice the consistency of throughout your artwork and being able to draw from? Or
Okay. Well, something about me using these recycled materials or recycled objects that have had domestic lifetimes with other people, and have I made that choice consciously, right? So I didn't make that choice with the steam iron. I was doing paintings. Neo-Expressionism in the late 70s and early 80s made me stop painting because I could not, I went to school in the 70s and learned photorealism. So I could not break down and do what Neo-Expressionism did, like Jean-Michel Basquiat. I just couldn't bring my mind to that. Also, I could not afford paint and brushes and canvas anymore. So I started doing found object assemblage first with jewelry, but then continued from there. But the steam iron, I was walking down the street and I saw an iron on the street. It had been run over by a car that looked like a face to me. And I brought it into my studio and I photographed it. And, you know, it just changed my life. It was like a real spiritual occurrence. I didn't have a plan for it because prior to that, maybe 3 years before that, I had about 20 irons in my studio. Because when I was a kid, I was the one who fixed broken things in our house. So my mother and grandmother gave me all these irons to fix over the years of my teenage years, and I never fixed them. I just said, okay, Mama, I'll fix it. And they just accumulated. And I threw those out. But 3 years afterwards, one iron on the street changed my life. You know? And I call it a spiritual occurrence because for the next 2 years after that, I never bought an iron. I always found them on the street. With the shoe, my son had a collection of shoes, his own shoes. Not a big collection, maybe like 10 pair. And I was going to try to make something out of them, but it wasn't enough to make anything. So I went to a thrift store to buy more men's shoes and sneakers. And noticed women's shoes were much more attractive. With more colors, more textures. So I just switched to women's shoes from there. Again, I just found the hair dryers. They just appealed to me as a stack. In the factory, they were piled up huge. The building had been abandoned for probably 15 years. So these hair dryers had been through floods and fires. And they had a beautiful patina on them. And just in that environment, they were just incredible. So I often feel and say that the objects find me. I don't really find the objects. You know? Yes?
While reading newspaper articles and watching television news, what is it that grabs you, that makes you want to create art out of what you see when you read?
When viewing the TV and reading the newspaper, what is it that grabs me that makes me want to make art out of what I see? it's just the times that we live in, you know. I mean, sometimes the news, CNN is not the reliable news band. They're giving you the half view of stories. But in New York, we have Radical Radio, WBAI FM 99.5. This is a commercial for WBAI. You can get them on the internet. Best radio station in the world. Some of the shows there give you the real point of view, you know, or the leftist point of view, or the conspiracy theory, but it really makes you think about things. So I play the station while I'm working all day long, because they mix it in with music too, which I love. And it's just that, you know, there are just times that you ask yourself, what is art about? Am I making just playthings for the rich? Am I affecting the lives of everyday people? You know, or am I just cashing in? So I can take either one of those positions at any time in the year, but during times of war, I feel I got to do something that speaks about a bigger issue. I can't do still lifes of flowers when there are people being murdered in Sudan. So just the reality and the horror of the times we live in makes me change to other things every once in a while. Yes?
Have you done any pieces that relate to the genocide in Darfur?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I did start writing a screenplay about it, but I haven't finished it yet. Anyone else?